Good morning, everyone. I'm John Kroger, and I am the president of Reed College. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to the commencement and graduation of the Reed College class of 2017. Today is a very joyous day, but before we begin, I want to recognize that this day also exists in the shadow of great grief for many members of our community. As some of you know, we lost one of our colleagues and classmates who died just a few days ago. Nico Villarreal was loved and respected by all of us here at Reed. He completed all of his work for his Bachelor of Arts degree, except for his oral argument and defense before he passed. The faculty has voted to waive that requirement of the degree and award Nico his BA today. Nico's three brothers, Julian, Roman, and Mateo, are here today. And at this moment, I'd like our Dean of Faculty, Nigel Nicholson, to present to the members of Nico's family the diploma signifying his graduation from Reed. And while we're doing this, if we could just take a moment of silence to remember Nico and hold him in our hearts and our thoughts for just a few moments. Thank you very much. Nico's passing reminds us that our lives, however long or short they may be, are very precious things. And we should go through our lives, and certainly go through this day, with a great deal of gratitude and joy in our hearts. And so before we move on with the program, I want to take a few moments to let us express our gratitude to people who helped get us to this point. First, I want to recognize our faculty at Reed College, and I would ask you to stand and let us thank you for all your hard work for the class of 2017. Quite simply, there's no faculty in the country that works harder to provide a great education to our students, and all of us are deeply appreciative for your efforts. I also want to thank all the Reed staff members, both those who are here and those who are not. The Reed staff does everything on this campus to support education and played a major role in getting all of our students to graduation today. They clean our facilities, they mow our lawns, they tutor our students, they supervise our labs, they admit everyone, they make sure everyone has financial aid, they make sure that we track everyone's graduation requirements and make sure that they satisfied them. So let's take a moment and thank the staff at Reed for everything they've done. Finally, for most of us who are graduating today, we wouldn't be here in this position if it weren't for help from family, friends, loved ones, spouses, partners. So I would ask the class of 2017 to rise and face your friends and family. And let's give all your friends and family a rousing ovation for helping you get where you are today. Thank you, everyone. We're so glad to have you here. To welcome everyone to today's event, I want to introduce Roger Perlmutter, distinguished scientist, doctor, and chair of the Reed College Board of Trustees.
Thank you, John. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, it's my privilege to welcome all of you to the 2017 commencement. For more than 100 years, the board has worked tirelessly to ensure the security of this institution because we believe in it. Because for all that period, the board has believed that by creating a great center of learning that focuses on the close reading of texts, on critical inquiry, and on asking substantive questions, we can actually improve the world. But today's focus, of course, is on the graduates of 2017 who have endeavored over the last 4 years to imbibe those lessons, have learned them well, and will carry on in the future to make a real difference in the world. Today, members of the class of 2017 join the ranks of our alumni. And for that, we offer our congratulations and our respect. And here to tell you about what it means to be an alumni member, I'd like to welcome the head of the Alumni Association, Richard Rohr.
Thanks very much. Allow me, with polite nods, to dispense with acknowledging our illustrious trustees, distinguished faculty, dedicated college administration and staff, proud parents and family, and other guests, and turn my full attention to you, my fellow alumni, and the newest members of the Reed College Alumni Association. Greetings and congratulations. I commend and truly thrill in your achievement. It's a great day. You can feel the electricity in the air, and that has nothing to do with this wonderful Portland weather. As now former students, you have, even before the conferring of degrees, been automatically inducted into the Alumni Association. You join an elite group of 17,000 or so Reedies, including some 5,000 who graduated in this century alone. Since you'll be alumni for longer than you were students, I hope you begin to find kinship in this accomplished and eclectic community. I would now ask, in a reversal of speaker etiquette, that you new alumni take out your cell phones right now, open your calendars, and mark the dates of October 13th through 15th. I see no one doing that, but that's okay. That's the timing of the National Alumni Welcome Weekend, when our Alumni Association chapters in Portland, Seattle, the Bay Area, Southern California, Chicago, Raleigh-Durham, Boston, Washington, D.C., and my chapter, New York, are planning one or more local alumni events to greet our newest members. Aside from offering intellectual and bodily nourishment, chapter events will present the added attraction of meeting and mingling with some of the interesting, talented, and remarkable Reedies living and working in that local area. While some of you may make it to campus next month for the annual reunions weekend, most will not, so I urge you, if possible, to attend a chapter welcome event this fall. I'm very lucky to be speaking to you in a year when the employment picture, especially for new grads, is the brightest it's been in more than a decade. But make no mistake, my business career has convinced me that the economy, our global economy, will always have far more demand than supply for the caliber of graduates coming out of Reed. That said, you should also know that your Alumni Association and the college's career office, the Center for Life Beyond Reed, are doing more now than ever before to help new alumni find and navigate the smoothest route to their desired career path, be it in public service, private enterprise, not-for-profit, the professions, and of course, academia. Don't be shy about seeking help. our new and growing professional networks in law, healthcare, technology, and finance, with others to follow, are resources we hope you'll use and also help develop for those who follow you. I hope you can maintain the friendships and bonds you've made at Reed. Yet I'm here to confirm that there's also recurring reward and pleasure in making and maintaining new relationships with other classmates and cohorts, with mentors and alumni of all ages, with future students, and with the college itself. Reed may not be perfect, but it's doing as much or more than any similar school to make the world, not to mention Portland, a more perfect place, and that's an inspiring heritage to be part of. Once you've had time to chill from your final semester, I hope you'll be able to connect with your larger alumni community. Many of you may already be in contact with alumni for mentoring, internships, or interviews. If you're not, and even if you are, the Welcome Weekend in October is a great kickoff to alumni life, especially if you've already departed Portland. And if you can't wait that long, you can contact a chapter representative by going to the Alumni Board webpage. At last, and in closing, I'll note that in the years since I've graduated Reed, I've received approximately 152 issues, of the amazing Reed magazine. Even with the ubiquity and immediacy of social media, the magazine is a well-curated guide to keeping current on the college's global community. My last 120 issues of the magazine have arrived during my married life, and my wife, whose only fault is in not being a Reedie, typically gets to the latest edition ahead of me. She pores over most issues, and as often as not, puts each aside saying, the people who went to Reed College do some very interesting things. May you all enjoy the same fate. Thank you and good luck.
As torrents in summer have dried in their channels, suddenly rise, oh, the sky is so cloudless, the sky is still cloudless. So hearts that are fainting grow full to o'erflowing, and they that behold it, mourn and marvel and know not that God at their fountains, been say yesterday. Thoughts that we as humans small could slow worlds and end it all. Lie around me where they fall before the new day. One more day when time is running out for everyone. Like a breath I knew would come, I reach for a new day. Hope is my philosophy, just needs days in which to be. Love of life means hope for me, born on a new day. You are the new day.
Every year, the graduating class invites a prior graduate of Reed College to come back and speak at commencement. They usually invite someone whose career, whose values, whose principles are an inspiration as they head off into the world beyond Reed. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. Arun Roth is a graduate of the class of 1992, so he's celebrating his 25th reunion this week. He's an English major. All English majors take pride. That's it? Arun is an award-winning journalist and radio broadcaster. He began his career at National Public Radio as an intern, and since then has been involved in some of the most well-known shows in America. Director of Talk of the Nation, producer of On the Media, and weekend host of NPR's All Things Considered. His films for Frontline have focused on issues of national security and military justice, and have included extensive coverage of the United States facility at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. He's a winner of the Peabody Award, nominated for an Emmy. Gives us great pleasure to welcome Arun back to campus.
Thank you. Thank you, President Kroger. Thank you, faculty and staff. And thank you most deeply, class of 2017, for this amazing honor of inviting me to speak to you. And give yourselves a hand. You know, you did it. Nicely done. It's been 25 years, but I remember just how bloody hard it is. So, enjoy it. I think that that kind of mix of excited energy and total exhaustion, the only thing that was akin to it was when I had a new kid, I had a new baby. And, just be thankful you don't have to attend to your thesis anymore after orals. You get to lock that kid in a tower. It's like something out of a creepy fairy tale. I've heard from some of you that I've been speaking with that you were interested in my thoughts about race and diversity and my experiences through school and career and life in America, being a first-generation citizen. So, race, diversity, immigration, I'm really happy we're not getting to anything too sensitive or, touchy on college campuses, anything like that. But look, this is Reed, so let's dive in. Let's get awkward, right? there's some surprising stuff in here as I reflected on this. It won't surprise any of you, I think, to know that these debates and similar debates were raging when I was here at Reed. I was actually behind a prank, we call it a guerrilla theater installation, that made a comment on this my freshman year. There used to be a tradition, and I think that this doesn't take place anymore from what I've heard, but it used to be that for the last Hume 110 lecture of every year, there would be some kind of prank. And these would range from the highbrow to the more jackassy kind of things, like the first three rows would show up naked, that kind of thing. My concept back in 1989 was a little bit of both. Now, I loved Hume 110. I loved the literature, loved reading Dante and Virgil, every minute of it, but it did kind of rankle me that it was called humanities when it was really felt like it should be called Western Civ, right? Western civilization. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Western civilization's awesome. But so for that last lecture, what we did was a group of friends of mine and I, we dressed up as Hindu gods. And as the lecture was starting, we walked through with a sort of a protest placard saying, Hindu deities demand equal time. And, thought you guys might like that. I was Shiva. Yeah. Now, the other Hindu gods were white kids, which today would be a little bit awkward, but it was Reed in 1992, so I had to work with what I had. And, in a way that kind of sums up what it was like being brown at Reed in 1992, 25 years ago, is that it wasn't hard to express yourself. There just weren't an awful lot of people who looked like you. Although, for me, as an Asian kid, it was actually something of an improvement over high school, which is one of the strange things about diversity, or the lack of it, at Reed, was that there were more Asian students than African American students. It didn't really reflect the diversity of America. And I know that that's something that you're wrestling with still, but I can tell you, looking out at your faces, that things are much improved from where that they were then. Reed back then, though, it was really cool for me, at least to suddenly be around. I was in high school, I was the only Indian kid, and all of a sudden I was around other Indians, Indian Americans, but also students from India, which was amazing and really empowering. Because if you think back to that time, at least where I was growing up, we were practically invisible at that point. It wasn't like when you have this wave of Desi celebrities, Indian celebrities who are out now, which is marvelous. I mean, Portland in 1992, there was like one place to get a decent curry. And now they're like in trucks. It's awesome. It's like being on the street in India. Before I get much deeper into this, I really want to stipulate that this is one individual's particular perspective on race, one Anglo-Indian American subjectivity. America, one of the changes I'll be talking about, America is now a lot more aware of degrees of difference in the black and brown experience. It's much more than that old black-white binary. So, as they say, this is just one person. This is just me speaking. But as I sat down a few weeks ago to start assembling my thoughts about this, I realized I had a lot more to say, a lot more feelings, deeper feelings, than I was aware about what it meant growing up, mixed race and mixed culture in America. It shouldn't have been a surprise because I had a similar experience just over a year ago when my colleague Rupa Shenoy honored me by interviewing me for the inaugural episode of her podcast. It's called Otherhood, and it's about the first generation experience in America, the immigrant experience. I really recommend checking it out, especially right now. It's amazing work. The conversation that I had with Rupa reinforced for me how my parents' journey made me who I am. I've always been aware of the material sacrifices that they made coming to America with an eye not on their future, but on mine and my brothers, but just how they straddled cultures and countries while they were raising me, how that's informed my life. It turns out that was worth deeper reflection. The other thing that shocked me and kind of disarmed me was hearing from Rupa how much it had meant to her as a younger journalist, hearing an Indian American hosting an NPR news program. And it was kind of funny because I've A diversity of voices on the air was something that was very important to me and my team when we were running All Things Considered out of Los Angeles. But that aspect of my own voice was not really a thing I wanted to consider. But I did learn in my time hosting and from friends and colleagues like Rupa that this part of my experience was worth considering and meaningful to share with others. So I thank you and I blame you for this further meditation or indulgence, depending on your perspective. I was the first one in my family born in America. My father is from a small town in the Indian state of Orissa. I'd really recommend a visit to everyone here, but don't spread the word too far because we kind of like that it's off the Western tourist track generally. My mother is from a small town in Bedfordshire in England. The two of them met in England, where he had gone to continue his medical studies. He was a doctor and she was a nurse. I can only imagine what they faced as an interracial couple in England in 1960. And I really have to imagine because it's something that they don't really talk about, never really like to talk about very much. I do know that my mother's parents were good Christian people in the best realist sense of that word. They had no problem with my father at all, as long as my brother and I were baptized. We weren't, but it was still okay. The real problems were on my father's side. My father his family is Brahmin. Now, they were very progressive for the time, but still strict in the basic traditional ways of caste and racial and social lines. My dad had put aside his love of mathematics to do what the family told him, to go and study medicine, as he was told to by his father. But when he got to England, he decided that he wanted to marry the awesome, amazing woman that he loved. And she happened to be a white English woman, and he was disowned. It wasn't until years later, after my brother and I were born, that the relationship was repaired, and crucially, really in large part, because my brother and I were the first male grandchildren. I don't know what would have happened if we had been a different gender, but my grandfather decided that if she has boys, maybe the white woman's not so bad. It's all right. So their sexism helped them get past their racism, which is, I guess it's good. I mean, it gets you in the door, and that's where you have to start. My family got to experience, a dizzying array of racial dynamics across cultures in India and England, in a newly independent Ghana in West Africa. This was before I was born. And they came to America, to Chicago, in 1968. Think about that for a minute, especially the history fans here. Chicago in 1968. So their introduction to the country is race riots, political assassinations, the Democratic Convention. It was like the country was coming apart at the seams. It was the first time that my father had treated stab or gunshot wounds, and my mother, coming from living in a village in West Africa, all of a sudden having to be told that you, as a white woman, do not walk into certain of these communities. It was a horrendous shock for them. Things were much more settled down when I was born a couple of years later. My family had moved to Boston, and then a few years later to Maryland, where I grew up. Being an Indian kid growing up in Southern Maryland in the 1970s was interesting. Interesting from this perspective. At the time, it was just boring as hell. But I say an Indian kid as a shorthand here because, again, I'm biracial, but one of the well-noted peculiarities about being mixed race is that if you look brown or black, you're brown or black. People don't see the half-white part generally, at least not on first glance. So as an Indian kid at the time, it was actually where I lived, it was hard to really have a sense of racial awareness because if you weren't black or white, you almost weren't part of the racial equation. There just weren't that many Indians around at the time where and when I was growing up. And the earliest sense of racial discrimination that I was aware of as a kid was that was experienced by my white mother. The disapproval from, my grandparents and others. Brahmins can be a disdainful lot. It's one of the things that comes with casteism. But I could say actually that growing up, easily the most racist people that I knew were older Indians who would shock me by the really repulsive things that they could say about African Americans, about people they considered low class. But being a kid in Indian at that time and space, this has changed over time, but you could, in a way, experience a taste of both worlds, the black and white thing, even though you weren't really part of either. White people would feel comfortable saying really racist things in front of me about blacks. Maybe I wasn't totally white, but I wasn't black, so I was cool. African Americans would feel, I'd find sometimes relaxed with me in a way that they would talk about problems about race that they wouldn't talk about in mixed company. And maybe being not just Indian, but mixed race myself, I felt that more acutely. Because moving between the Anglo and the Indian sides isn't always so comfortable. There's an Anglo-Indian character. He's one of the side characters in A Passage to India in the Forster novel. And Forster describes him as being okay in the company of Indians and okay in the company of Brits. But in mixed company, he's just an anxious mess. And for all the other things that he got wrong in that book about race, Forster nailed that. He got that so right. Growing up Indian and biracial in America in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't like there were really role models to look to. On the Indian side, there wasn't really anything. You know, there'd be the odd character as exotic, or maybe comic relief. And this is where it helped to tap into that pan-racial term, Asian. Now, Asian American, it's kind of a ridiculous term because it describes way too diverse a group of people. But when there aren't that many of you, and especially when you're a kid, it can be good to be a part of a group at all. So, you know, we could root for Bruce Lee or Sulu on Star Trek, or basically any of the Asian characters who weren't rank comic stereotypes. And sad to say, but bonus points for actually playing the ethnicity that you were, because there was a lot of mixing and matching on that. On the biracial front, again, not a lot of role models to pick from either. But there was one character on TV that I really related to. And this is going to sound a little bit goofy, but I'm talking about Mr. Spock on Star Trek. Now the nerds among you, and there are a few, right? Know that Mr. Spock was half human and half Vulcan. Now, he was a guy that I could relate to. He would have been compelling enough as an outsider character, just being an alien, but being half alien made Spock my guy. The Indian half of me, growing up where I did, it did feel like an alien. You know, we had a strange religion. Our gods had too many arms and weird food and clothes and smells. And I'm telling you, Spock was a model of biracial alienation. Forgive the pun. You know, humans saw the Vulcan half. Vulcan saw the human half. You know, and bless the old Star Trek, it took on race a lot. You know, anytime racial stuff came up, somebody would have a go at Spock's racial mix, and you know, he handled it with a kind of dignity that I tried to emulate. Now, fast forwarding, I still love Star Trek and I still watch it with my kids, but I'm happy to say that some decades later, that they have a lot more to pick from in terms of visibility and role models. You know, my daughter doesn't have to look to an alien. I just saw, like, in the Scholastic catalog, there's actually a book with a character exactly like her, a Jewish Indian American hero, and the book is actually good too. There's this whole wave now of Indian American celebrities with their own shows. There's Indian men playing romantic leads. That's pretty nice, and that was unimaginable to me when I was a kid. At the same time, it was unimaginable that my 8-year-old friends, like my daughter right now, would be worried about their parents getting deported. And I'm sorry to make a dark turn, but you know, we have to be real, right? Because that's the reality that my kids are now facing. I mean, it's a much more diverse world, and they have these heroes, but I do hear them coming home from school and from their Indian friends. They're not the only kid there anymore. and the ones who are there are nervous. They've seen this man who said awful things about immigrants get elected to the highest office in this country, succeeding in part by appealing to a very different idea of what makes America great. So what's that all about? Has progress stopped, or are we moving backwards? I don't think so. It's pretty clear to me that a lot of the anger and fear is a backlash against that very progress and success. I want to tell you a story about where I live now in Lexington, Massachusetts. Historic Lexington, Massachusetts, birthplace of the American Revolution. Well, the history people will say again, the first shots were actually in Arlington, so technically. But there's a huge Indian community now in Lexington. I mean, again, I was the only Indian kid when I went to high school. Like when I drop off my kids, it's like this fantastic rainbow. And every year, there's a huge Diwali celebration. And it's just awesome to take the kids to this. We put on our Indian clothes and own the night, and it's like a 4-hour talent variety show. Young people showing off just mad skills, singing, dancing, Indian classical, modern stuff, just everything. Now, my wife is not Indian, but she's been to India. She speaks more Hindi than I do, is very comfortable. But on this night, my son, and this is about 4 years ago, he said to her, "Mom, I feel kind of bad for you." And she said, "Why?" And he said, "Because the only other white people here are waiters and janitors." And of course, I just kind of decide, yeah. It's a long time coming, but I think that is what some people are afraid of, is unnerving them. I mean, if you think about that, think about when he made that comment. My son had only ever known a black president, and where he was seeing this, brown represented power to him. And in terms of this backlash as well, and there's the fact that I don't want to minimize what might happen with, say, deportations, of the impact that is going to happen with families across this country. But for the most part, the immigrants and their kids who have made this country great, we're not going anywhere. And we're... And we're having babies, and like my kids who are really embracing their own mixed racial and cultural pedigree. Soon this country is going to be more brown than white. But then how do we get through this divided, racially contentious period? I mean, I think about the America my parents came to in 1968, where it felt like the country was coming apart at the seams. You can't just bide your time until 2042 when we will be majority brown, according to the projections. It's going to happen, though. What I would say is that today, right now, we need to be able to connect. And if I may say so, you, class of 2017, Reed College class of 2017, you having the intellectual pedigree that you now possess, you will need to connect for this to happen. Now, like it or not, whatever the background you came from before, and I can tell by some of the extended families that are here today that it's a big deal for many of you to be at this point, but wherever you came from, you are elite now. And for a lot of people in the angry cohort I've been talking about, that's worse than being brown. That's almost as bad as being part of the news media. I'm all three, so I'm just in a bad condition. But seriously though, how do you connect with people who might fear or even hate you? And I'm not talking about you need to justify your existence, but really connecting with people. I can't make any claims to a universal experience that provides some magic formula to connecting. It's not like being biracial is like having O positive blood and you can just, heal everyone. But I think there might be something instructive in what I've encountered growing up so mixed up. Being biracial you have to serve as a bridge between cultures. As I mentioned regarding my Brahmin grandparents and my white English mother, my brother and I were building bridges just by the fact of being born. When you have to say, explain Christianity to your Hindu relatives or vice versa, or explain language and clothes and hold all these multiple perspectives and identities in your head at the same time, it's something that can be useful making your way through an increasingly diverse country. This was how I grew up, living and then soon after Reed, working in Southern Maryland and getting into long, deep theological discussions with evangelical Christians. Impolite, real discussions. I would make people take me step by step through how I could lead a life of virtue in every way but still go to hell just for being a Hindu. Now, it wasn't like I made any Hindu converts, but I did connect with a lot of people. And I know that I made more than a few doubt that God would command me to eternal suffering just because I spelled his name differently. I think what served me from this experience in my life and really in my career is an openness that has helped engender trust. Whether it's gaining the trust of a young Marine who has been accused of war crimes, or another accused war criminal, a Guantanamo Bay detainee who has been horrendously abused by our government, by my government. When I'm reaching out to these people, there's some commonality in establishing that connection. Sometimes establishing that degree of trust can take you into extremes. That former Guantanamo detainee I just mentioned, been recently transferred to Serbia, and I went to report on him for the frontline I was doing. He trusted me so much that when the authorities in Serbia were harassing him, he came to my hotel room to hide out from the Serbian authorities, which was a really tough phone call with my editor. You're not supposed to get involved in the story. And I'm like, yeah, where is he? He's in my room right now. It was the most awkward moment of my journalistic career, but really it was the greatest, most telling moment as well in that whole documentary because of that connection, because of what it revealed. And I'll tell you from what didn't get into the front line, also the funniest, finding myself in a hotel at midnight, drinking alcohol and eating pork in front of a hunger-striking Muslim who was laughing at us and toasting us by taking pretend sips of water. And I had to remind myself in that moment that was weird, because it wasn't the first time I'd found myself eating and drinking in front of a fasting Muslim. Don't get me wrong, I'm not an insensitive Hindu dork. I'm respectful to people who are observant, but again, this is part of how I grew up in this kind of mixed up way. My wedding was a beautiful mix of Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, atheists, Muslims, and everybody just partying. We found a pundit who was willing to mix up the Hindu and Jewish ceremonies and take out all the sexist crap, and it felt very Reedy, like the way we deconstructed the wedding ceremony. I didn't realize it till it was happening, but I'm raising my kids in the same way that I was raised, that no categories are exclusive. I know that's something that you believe as well. When I was an adolescent, I had both a confirmation in the church and a Hindu thread ceremony. And in my own kids, I'll probably add bar and bat mitzvahs to that, get a trifecta. It's not hard selling coming-of-age ceremonies that come with awesome presents to the kids. It's to be multicultural. But when I was a kid, it wasn't weird that I had to pick between being a Christian and a Hindu, or an atheist for that matter, as my father was. That was just how things were. That was how the world was. And that, my friends, that's how the world is. A wonderful thing that I found embracing these peculiarities, embracing my mixed up identity on the air, is that it connected me with more people. Now, it's not like, Anglo-Indian Americans who love Star Trek and zombie movies and hip hop are part of the public radio demographic, very much not so. But the biggest response, the most personal response I had to anything I've ever done on NPR was this tribute to Leonard Nimoy, this appreciation for him, what he meant to me being a biracial kid growing up where I did. I really, and this goes beyond race and just getting into all categories, just implore you, class of 2017, to just really embrace your own messy peculiarities, the wonderful quirks that brought you here to this place, and embrace them as you go out into the world. And then connect with people who are different from you. Connect in really impolite and messy ways. And you might be lucky the same way that my father and my mother and I were. You might find the perfect life partner in that process. There's one last story I just want to share with you, and this is going back to 1988. Pretty much right after I'd arrived in Oregon, after the first week of classes, I went with a group of friends to the Saturday market in Portland, which was just really cool. I mean, there are all these kind of wares that you don't have in suburban Maryland when I was growing up. And there was this guy there who had a table of religious literature, and he was proselytizing, and he shouted out to me. I don't know why he picked me out, but he said, "Excuse me, did you know that Jesus Christ is the only God who is resurrected from the dead, and only he can save you?" And I walked over to him in a very friendly, open, 18-year-old way, said, actually, that's not true. There are a number of religious traditions that have resurrected God, some of them major and minor. And I talked with the Hindu, like Egyptian, versions, Zoroastrianism, and he listened very politely and nodded and said, "That's really interesting. Do you go to Reed College?" But what I think was great and wonderful about that interaction, it was not me, and what best represented Reed, it wasn't me being clever or smart-ass, kind of showing somebody up intellectually. It was intellectually engaging with a stranger, respectfully and openly, but someone who might be the complete opposite of me, politically, racially, socially, culturally, someone who might think I was going to hell for being a Hindu. But it doesn't matter, just get in the door and then take it from there. This kind of engagement, I think, is the best of what your education at Reed can represent. When I think about the connections I've been able to make, it's not just having the same skin tone as the Guantanamo detainee or talking about martial arts and fishing with the military guys. More often it's the more particular and peculiar, readier things, like, a shared love of Virgil or John Coltrane. It's this kind of, hate to sound nerdy, but discursive connection. It's something that I think all of you have been working at in your time here. It can really be transformative. So keep that going. Get out there and connect. And thank you, class of 2017. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Will the candidates of the Division of the Arts please rise? Woo!
Mr. President, I present for the degree of Bachelor of Arts the candidates, both present and in absentia, of the Division of the Arts.
Upon the recommendation of the faculty of Reed College, and by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees, I hereby confer on the students of this division the degree of Bachelor of Arts with all the rights and privileges thereunto appertaining.
Brian Layton Bartz. Lee Belcher. Eric Ryan Borer. Rye Burke. Stephen James Chibukas. Stella Castle Silman. Kira Sheehan Collins. Dylan Steve Fela. Jack Timothy Finnerty. Michael Wilder Frizzell. Neil Edwin Magruder Gibson. John Peter Gonella. Oscar Rene Guerrero. Anastasia Joy Hansen. Vasiliki Ioannou. Sean Michael Key Ketter. Daphne Leellen Lyda. Harrison Ross Martin. Chloe Ann Kathleen Nielsen. Charlie Perez. Layla Sierra Pyle. Jamie Christine Serbia. Katz Tamanaha. Luis Mario Valenzuela. Isabella Mimi Weiss. Forrest James Wilson. Will the graduates please be seated? Will the candidates of the Division of History and Social Sciences please rise?
Mr. President, I present for the degree of Bachelor of Arts the candidates, both present and in absentia, of the Division of History and Social Sciences.
Upon the recommendation of the faculty of Reed College, and by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees, I hereby confer upon the students of this division the degree of Bachelor of Arts, with all the rights and privileges thereunto appertaining.
Madeline Ruth Janak Adams. Grace Bennett Alexander. Jamie Christine Archer. Brian Armada. Anne Brazil Baker. Gulnara Janova Barnett. Gabrielle Rebecca Blackman. Brandon Roderick Borhan. Francesca Anita Breedlove. Nicholas Keith Brown. Sophia Guo Bucci. Sarah Catherine Canavan. Leah Celestine Cantor. Alejandro Sol Chavez. Alex Cohen. Catherine S. Collins. Eva Dalbina. Eve Paulina Felsenthal. Alexander Dane Freitag. Katerina Galkin. Francisca Garcia. Hannah Elizabeth Gronke. Paris Simone Gresham. Grace Patricia Haley. Ben Hamati. Zachary Bird Harding Laprade. Rebecca Wanda Hausdorf. Daniel Hong. Julian Michael Howells. Drew Montgomery Jackson. Mark Edward Jarrett. Rosa Kanchan Kalish. Megan Elizabeth Keating. Michael Christian Santos Kepler. Maya Kimura. Dana Elizabeth Koshelny. Tashi Ngudup Lama. Michaela Rose Lieb. Isabel Maria Linden. Julie Shin Martin. Lillian Nicholson Martin. Miranda Ruth Mission. Lazola Vuyo Niamakazi. Caitlin Alicia O'Shea. Haley Renee Para Kane. Aloysius Truman Prasa Patchen. Jeanette Tao Fang. Natalie Sarah Pong. Florence Randari. Marcus Lawrence Riedler. Louis Sho Robertson. Allison Claire Ryan. Jordana M. Ryerson. Cyril Ian Rizak. Maris Scanlon. Ray Self. Vivian Morgana Skrupskis. Rosemary Girard Sokolov. Stephen Paul Stackhouse. Sierra Nicole Swan. Carter Robinson Thomas. Camilla Costanza Turchetti. Mattison Carl Unger. Rohan Aditya Ani Law. Lie Chen Virtuoso. Savannah Jo Walseth. Douglas Grant Walter. Rebecca Willis Conger. Jordan Riley Wynn. Will the graduates please be seated? Will the candidates of the Division of Literature and Languages please rise?
Mr. President, I present for the degree of Bachelor of Arts the candidates, both present and in absentia, of the Division of Literature and Languages.
Upon the recommendation of the faculty of Reed College, and by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees, I hereby confer upon the students of this division the degree of Bachelor of Arts with all the rights and privileges thereunto appertaining.
Cody G. Barnes. Lucas Willie Mayer Binion. Tara Gabriella Borgant. Eli Marion Rudnick. Hayden Ellsworth Bunker. Alexander Francis Karakotsios. Christopher Reed Creech. Lyle Robert Daniel. Sandra Esmeralda de Anda. Juliet Grace de la Huerga. Poppy Ray Ellard. Hannah Catherine Earhart. Alexander Pierce Gherkin. Connor Arthur Greer. India Ray Hamilton. Sierra Faith Hill. Genevieve Marie Hook. Peter Phillips House. Naima Nadelia Karshmar Britton. Hayden Dana Kinney. Benjamin Orion Landauer. Eleanor Storer Lawrence. Alexis Rose Leonetti. Hazel Light. Grace Elena Moon. Ying Ying Ying. Alexandra Kirsten Parker. Daniel Michael Pogust. Taylor Jackson Pope. Calix Bowden Reed. Noah Alexander Sammel. Louis Sears Sherman. Marianne Elizabeth Schnell. Henry Cole Smith. Caroline Van Sickle Toll. Jasmine Tintoot Williams. Priscilla Sukying Wu. Will the graduates please be seated? Will the candidates of the Division of Mathematics and Natural Sciences please rise?
Mr. President, I present for the degree of Bachelor of Arts the candidates, both present and in absentia, from the Division of Mathematics and Natural Sciences.
Upon the recommendation of the faculty of Reed College, and by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees, I hereby confer upon the students of this division the degree of Bachelor of Arts with all the rights and privileges thereunto appertaining.
Michaela Juliana Adams. Taylor Whitney Allen. Sabrina Marbot Apple. Amanda Jade Asato. Allison Marie Ashby. William Henry Ashfield IV. Ella Caroline Banyas. Dakota Joy Bradley. Alexa Adele Buckner. Jacqueline Lauren Calkins. Lydia Grace Sophia Campbell. Cole Charles Campion. Vikram Chanson Chanharur. Vidya Chi. Elias Cohen. Jalen Hero Kola. Gabriel Michael Colacion. Jonathan Kent Kroom. Audrey Elizabeth Danner. Kostov Dother. Maura Kathleen Differding. Madeline Jane Dinsdale. Rose Margaret Hoffman Driscoll. Yuka Asashi. Muldrow Dosky Etheridge. Cameron Alexander Fish. Nicholas William Philip Francese. Kevin Bryant Freimiller. Rick Ghosh. Mackenzie Beverly Gibbons. Forrest Emerson Glebe. Rose Carolyn Ganud. Robert Gottesman. Vincent Lou Griffith. Clara M. Herrera. Kristen Michelle Hirata. Samuel Martin Johnston. Carrie Ann Jones. Christopher Charles Keene. Hyunji Jamie Kim. Laura Helen Kinchelow. Joey J. Coe. Alec Richard Kozik. Sydney Alice Lastella. Haley Noel Leatherman. Alexander Lehman Palive. Eric Osvaldo Lopez. Yasemin Donaciana Lopez. Alexander Luschik. Yasmina Ann Dumont Marden. Zachary Shane Maffey. Kimberly Ann McGowan. Carl Gerhard Menzel. Brent Christopher Michael. Benjamin Christopher Altman Morrison. Stephanie Signor Opio. Aurora Marguerite LaBounty Owens. Alexander C. Pan. Edgar Fernando Perez. Deborah Modi Raduma. Madeline Jill Robin. Ricardo Gabriel Rojas Echenique. Benjamin Isaac Schlosser. Melinda Rachel Serrato. Foster Chauvin Perino Siebert. Nicholas Edward Tideman Solomon. August Owen Staubus. Nico Brett Terry. Vivian Tilinsky. Alicia Uchida. Carla L. Velarde Peraza. Sarah Jo Weinstein. Evan Francis Welch. Wiki Yao. Nikal Johannes. Will the graduates please be seated? Sorry, I went to get a drink. Nope. Put it down. Will the candidates of the Division of Philosophy, Religion, Psychology, and Linguistics please rise?
Mr. President, I present to you for the degree of Bachelor of Arts the candidates, both present and in absentia, from the Division of Philosophy, Religion, Psychology, and Linguistics.
Upon the recommendation of the faculty of Reed College, and by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees, I hereby confer upon the students of this division the degree of Bachelor of Arts with all the rights and privileges thereunto appertaining.
Shayan Abtahi. Jordan David Alexander. Maria Christine Carpenter. Anjali Marin Kamdar Claes. Eric Jeffrey Stebbins Dahl. Aaron Benjamin Dirks. Chase Ray Doremus. Mark Jerome Pin Feinstein. Arlo Isabella Jane Feldhaus. Emily Rose Garcia. Philip Allen Georges. Nicholas Daniel Gigliotti. Kayla Ann Good. George Goodell. Brian Avery Haas. Faye Hall. Jocelyn Samantha Hansen. Laura Ann Israel. Alexander Jimenez Winnicky. Maxwell Harrison Jocelyn. Aliana Claire Knopfler. Ariane Z. Lacra. Jareth Vincent Lancelotta. Shay Connor McElroy. Abigail Claire Mosing. Anthony Tuan Nguyen. Aisha Ann Pettigrew. Sharon Korkar Agdam. Aaron Lakram Ramcharan. Henry George Romero. Rebecca Ann Ruda. Nicolette Francis Sutherland. Max Taino Hughes Velez. Nathan Gregory Ward. Gabrielle Grace Walcott. Molly Rose Warden. Karina Kasikan Yu. Nicholas Ludlow Zimmer. Will the graduates please be seated? Will the candidates who have completed interdisciplinary majors please rise?
Mr. President, I present for the degree of Bachelor of Arts the candidates, both present and in absentia, who have completed interdisciplinary majors.
Upon the recommendation of the faculty of Reed College, and by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees, I hereby confer upon these candidates the degree of Bachelor of Arts with all the rights and privileges thereunto appertaining.
Tyler Valentine Jocelyn Allen. Flavia Maria Portoleto. Michelle Diane Ceballos. Carolyn Staden Cole. Madeline Marie Dennison. Oscar Cosmo Erickson. Cecilia Ann Irwin. Florin Thayer. Alexandra V. Gumas. Anders Hanneman. Ashlyn Elizabeth Hatch. Daniel Alexander Heinz. Annalise Curie Hill. Of course.
Lest no one forget that Reed College is a smooth-running administrative machine. Is there anything you'd like to say while...
What they do, have a table collapse? Who was that? Thank you. Are you Dylan? Or you're Annalise? Are you Annalise? Good. Annalise Curie Hill. Dylan Russell Holmes. Sarah Cox Kellerman. Lauren Catherine Cupper. Danting Lee. Garrett Wesley Link. Heidi Louise Loning. Ian Keith Morrison. Nadav Mualim. Jing Xian Eng. Charles Everett Nunziata. Celebrity Ni Kadzino. Samuel David Olson. Helena Elizabeth Pedrati. Aubrey Marina Peltz. Elliot Max Robinson. Catherine Josephine Rogers. Edward Hutchinson Sand. Diego Josue Sosa Coba. Alicia Ruth Toshima. Haley Louise Vanderjagt. Claire Helen Young. Will the graduates please be seated?
Mr. President, I present in absentia the candidate for the degree of Master of Arts in Liberal Studies.
This is really anticlimactic. Upon the recommendation of the faculty of Reed College and by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees, I hereby confer on this candidate the degree of Master of Arts with all the rights and privileges thereunto appertaining.
I now invite your applause for the class of 2017.